because it is a centralized network. And the tokenomics are backwards because of all that money that got raised up front. That was the first of the ICOs in their case. And that's, I mean, they've been at this longer than almost anybody else. And they haven't made a lot of progress.
Hey, everybody, it's Eri from Tokyo. This is your cryptocurrency update from Japan, and that intro was Caitlin Long. Yes, okay, the feds have been very unfair to her, but the entire blockchain community should be deeply disappointed in the comments she made. It was made in a podcast where she conflates the decentralized XRP ledger with a centralized digital asset of all kinds company, Ripple. I don't think it's leadership. I think it's ugly tribalism. Ripple never did an ICO, and the XRP ledger, it is not Ripple. And not a lot of progress? Oh my goodness. It's the same as a lot of Bitcoin maxis. Here's Heidi, the blockchain chick. She thinks that crypto is suspiciously quiet right now. Quiet? Whoa. You need to see what's happening in the XRPL ecosystem. Holy cow. Just in the last hour, we have new XRP DeFi funding. There is a new Ripple acquisition and a new RLUSD integration. We're going to talk about it in this video. Let's first talk about the acquisition. Ripple has acquired Rail. Rail Financial powers over 10%, yes, 10% of all global business-to-business stablecoin payment volume. So, hey fam, please tell Caitlin Long why Ripple was a perfect fit. In their blog, they state that the premium digital asset liquidity, including RLUSD and XRP, are going to be working along others like USDT and USDC. So wrap it up. And we see in this post from Vet that Rail supports the SEPA, Fedwire, ACH, and Swift payment rails, among a few others, as well as the big 4 layer 1 networks. That's Bitcoin, Ethereum, Tron, and Solana. XRP Ledger will join that list. And a pair of XRP USD could make use of the supported payment rails above. And a breaking integration for the stablecoin RLUSD, which comes on Ethereum and the XRP ledger. It is Metacomp. They're based in Singapore, and they have built a platform called StableX, and it is to simplify cross-border payments, streamline FX and settlement, and support exotic currencies and real-time payouts. And breaking, a $3 million round is fueling the institutional grade yield protocol Doppler. This is fantastic for the XRP DeFi. The platform features secure custody, integrated vaults, real-time proof of reserves, and audited risk controls to meet those institutional standards. And we got the best news out of the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, and it is that the division sees liquid staking activities in connection with protocol staking not involving a security. Unfortunately, there's one left at the SEC that is working against crypto, and that is Crenshaw. She has said no to all the XRP ETFs. This commissioner can't leave soon enough. Her official position actually expired on June 5th, 2024. However, the SEC commissioners are permitted to continue serving in a holdover capacity for up to 18 months beyond their term expiration if no successor has been confirmed, which in this case extends until December 5th, 2025, unless she is replaced earlier. As of August 2025, as you know, she remains in her position, and she has been actively issuing statements as a commissioner. The Caitlin Long clip that was floating around Twitter was quite short. I've got the really more complete, more detailed, more understanding in this 6-minute clip. So I'm going to let this take you out. And until next time, do take care. Sayonara for now. Bye-bye.
because stable coins are a new payment system that exists outside of the banking system. Tokenized bank deposits are different. The banks are now looking at the non-banks getting the ability to have their own payment system and saying, we want in on that. And so the interesting question then is what happens to fractional reserve banking? And it does actually then come back to a very, very, very important question, which is who's going to provide credit for small businesses? Because it ain't Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan and Citi, okay? It's the small banks on the street corner, and they don't have access to the technology. Guess who's working with them? You can see from the press releases we've put out that we are actually bringing that technology to that market. The vast majority of payments are still originated through the community banks, but they roll up to the big banks. So JP Morgan and Wells Fargo originate more than half of ACH payments. You probably didn't know that.
No,
they
I didn't.
They dominate ACH because they're clearing payments for all these small banks and they're raping them. Wise, formerly TransferWise, put in a comment letter that did a big analysis a couple years ago on the markup that these big banks charge for clearing payments for little banks. They charge up to a 100x markup. Okay, so if somebody can push the cost of payments out to the street corner bank, okay, it takes some of the power away from these large banks. A lot of people are looking at this going, why do the community banks exist? I have the opposite question. Why do the GSIBs exist? We don't need them for foreign exchange anymore.
Right.
We don't, they're holding everybody hostage as too big to fail. The real creators of credit that we care about, for which the securities markets can't produce the same magnitude of credit, is the small community banks.
Exactly. No, I've been thinking about this from a global perspective of how do you break the City of London and their forex trade, right? And that's what I've been thinking about. And I keep
Tether
looking at
created it.
Tether, and it looks like Ripple, the Ripple network has been blessed for a variety of reasons. If you're happy to push back on me about that, I'm just reading what I see. So I'm not. I bring it up, and everybody's like, "You're shilling for Ripple," and I'm not shilling for anything, folks.
I don't mind that. I think it overstates how important that network is. Part of the problem is the banks have always been suspicious of it,
right?
Because it is a centralized network. And the tokenomics are backwards, right? So one of the step back in creating these tokenization platforms, the people who extracted money up front are never going to be trusted because everybody's going to look and think that anything that they do is an exit scam to try to dump on retail. Okay, the most effective tokenization platforms are the ones where there was no money up front or very little money up front, and that's Bitcoin and Ethereum. So it's really that simple. I don't think you're ever going to get the trust because of all that money that got raised up front. That was the first of the ICOs in their case. And that's, I mean, they've been at this longer than almost anybody else. And they haven't made a lot of progress. And now what did they try to do? Instead of trying to sell that into the banking industry, they're getting their own regulated financial institutions and trying to issue a stable coin. So that's kind of, in some ways, an admission that the base layer blockchain didn't get the adoption that they were looking for. Now, I will also say the Biden administration was a big part of that, right? By forcing it offshore and saying, you can't, basically, this is the SEC, Gary Gensler, trying to use that because it was the obvious case since it was the first ICO to say that was an illegal securities offering, right? And going after them. And that hamstrung them. It didn't hurt Ripple as much as the Fed hurt us, right? Everybody who was targeted by the Biden administration was hurt to varying degrees. So, but I'm acknowledging that for the XRP army that's going to come after me for saying something I think rational about it, that it's not going to take over. It's not. If it were going to take over, it would have taken over a long time ago. And now they've actually pivoted to issuing US dollar stablecoins on the network, which kind of tells you that they understand that the base layer network is not going to become the base layer of replacing SWIFT. And part of it is because of those tokenomics. But that said, I mean, I think part of the reason Ethereum is running, the price has run a lot, is because when the US Treasury decides which permissionless network it's going to tokenize T-bills on, and by the way, they've of course not announced this, I'm speculating based on something that I heard, this is coming. They're not going to use Ripple. They're going to use Ethereum. They may use Bitcoin, but the Bitcoin layer twos are not mature enough for something like that, right? They've got to think like a bank. And the most mature blockchain platform by far for this type of issuance is Ethereum. Solana's coming up, but it's so centralized. I don't know that the U.S. government would want to take that risk. So I'm speculating here. The Bitcoiners are trying really hard to be able to push layer twos. And I think there's some really interesting layer twos in Bitcoin, but it's still a little early. So I don't know what the sequencing is. How long does Treasury wait before it does this? Does it wait and see, who's the new Fed chair and whether Bessent himself might be the new Fed chair? I'm sure he wants to do both jobs. That'd be amazing. It has happened before, as he's pointed out.
Yeah.
And then whether they can work with the Fed or not.